Hello, everybody, and welcome. It is so great to have you guys joining us today. My name is Kristina, and on behalf of myosh, I am so pleased to be hosting this conversation with you. Today, we are exploring a topic that is becoming increasingly visible in workplaces across Australia: late diagnosis ADHD at work. Now, many professionals are now receiving an ADHD diagnosis, whether it's in their 30s, their 40s, their 50s. People who have built successful careers, led teams, delivered results, yet often describe feeling chronically overwhelmed, constantly compensating or working twice as hard just to sort of stay on top of things. And what really makes this conversation particularly important is that it challenges the way that we often think about ADHD in the workplace. Rather than viewing it as purely as an individual challenge, we're going to explore what late diagnosis reveals about modern work design, like role clarity, cognitive load, change fatigue, psychosocial risk, and most importantly, what you or your leaders can do to design work in a way that will support your performance or your colleagues' performance, your accountability and well-being for everyone. Before we get started, I really want you guys to participate throughout the session. So we'll be discussing questions, going through real world examples and practical strategies. So please feel free to share your thoughts or questions in the chat as we go. And if you have any questions at the end that we haven't gotten to, we'll reach out to you after the session as well. I'm absolutely delighted to be joined today by Dr. Natalie Flatt. Nat is a lifespan psychologist and the co-founder of Connect Psych Services, Connect My Mind and Connect Assist Services. She also, on top of all of that, is the Chief Mental Health Advisor to Superfriend. She's known for bringing a really practical lens to complex psychological topics, helping leaders translate insight into meaningful action in the workplace. Natalie, I can't thank you enough for joining us today, and I'm so excited for this chat. Before we sort of roll into our structured conversation, or as structured as both of us could be, can you set the scene for us? Why does this conversation sort of matter now? What are you finding now?
Yeah, look, thanks so much for having me. I always love our chats, Kristina, and hi everyone. Thanks for joining. And it is, I think that let's start off by saying this is a conversational piece today. And I think that we've kind of not done the slides for a purposeful reason, like just getting everyone to sit back and listen and reflect, because this is the point, isn't it? It's really about understanding and about that empathy piece. And that's really relevant, because I feel everyone here is going to resonate with a lot of people. If you're a leader, HR, someone quietly wondering, is this about me today? It's personal, it's not just professional, it's generally personal. As you've said, Kristina, I started my career as a child psychologist, with the young ones, the 5 to 12s. I've done many diagnoses over the years, and I've also stated and spoken to a lot of teachers where I said, no, I don't think that's the diagnosis, that there's something else within the workplace that, or the school setting, that could actually be of assistance there. But in the later years, as I've moved really more so into corporate and have also then worked with a number of, the adult clients there, I've sat with the most capable, driven people, people that are just like I put on a pedestal on how amazing they are. And I've then, also once they've got that diagnosis later in life, have I suppose wept with relief that they've always thought that something was wrong with them. Yeah. Because they're really the outlier, and wondered, and it's now finally something that has been named that is so helpful to them. We don't always want to use the labels because of how they can create that level of stigmatization, but with late diagnosis of ADHD, a lot of the individuals like, I cannot believe how I've coped without this diagnosis for so long. And so those moments don't leave me when I hear that as well, and really a large part of why I do what I do. So, I feel that we're really at a turning point, in workplaces, because, we a lot of the time we have this word ADHD and, we're kind of, we put in a visual of what that really looks like. And it's always been really incomplete. So, understanding that it's really ADHD is more of a lifespan, a neurodevelopmental difference, one that doesn't just resolve, when you turn 18 or 25, when the brain completely forms. It's really one that can actually change an individual's across their career as well, and one that really interacts quite specifically and very significant. So this is a conversation, that's just organisations, are now just being asked to have, not just, how do we support this individual, but really how is our work environment designed, and who is it actually working for, knowing that modern workplaces are changing at a rapid rate. So this is, I think today I'll both be speaking really from a clinical evidence and also lived experience. Being classed as a high functioning ADHD diagnosis of last year. So for all the knowledge I've had over the years, Kristina, it still hit me. Like
absolutely. It's like,
it's going to be a good
you've got something happening, and then to expect the answer is going to be, yes, you do have this. And then when you hear it, you're still surprised. It's like, oh, but it hits you in a different way, doesn't it? And it just makes everything make sense. I think before we move on, I want to hear from the audience. I'm going to launch a poll now for you all. How does your workplace currently approach ADHD or neurodiversity? I'm really keen, and I'm sure Natalie is as well. We're really keen to see what you guys are currently doing, if anything, and see if there is something that you might be able to take away from this later on, after we finish today's session, that you might be able to implement. So if you could go through and answer some of that. I'm seeing some answers here. What do you sort of notice when you've heard people ask that question, or in the responses here, what are you noticing is usual or not usual?
I'm not. I think that, with a low rate that I'm seeing of the workplace adjustments, I don't think that it is anyone to really blame here, because this is a topic that we don't really know how to adjust. And hence, again, while we're having the conversations, that's where you really want to be starting. You've got the individual support, 39%. So it's getting pushed back onto the actual individual. That's not really going to help by way of psychosocial
I was going to say
hazard reduction, because it needs to be a system change as well as individual support. So the two-pronged approach is something that we are really passionate about, and certainly at Connect Psych and also at Superfriend, is that it's got to be looked at from the higher order and also lower order levels of
definitely.
control.
I think you also mentioned at the start of answering that question that it's nobody's fault, and I completely agree with that, even down to the individual that has ADHD. Like, we didn't know that we had it until later on in life, and it's something that we sort of just dealt with and got on with. And so we wouldn't have even thought to ask for a different work design. Hey, I wouldn't have thought in my head, oh, I should ask for a different pattern of hours or something like that that will allow me to work to my best ability. So it's not a blame game on the employees. It's not a blame game on you as the as a colleague or as the worker. It's something that we all need to just educate ourselves on and improve and get better at. Hey.
It's a lack of understanding, and I think that's where, and when we don't understand, we can make assumptions, and that's where we don't want to be continually working off assumptions, because that's actually going to erode psychological safety in the workplace. So we want to be able to create those environments where we can work with the individual on what do you need? What do you need right now? And I know even that is a very difficult thing to do as a leader, by way of adjustment. But, just to kind of keep in the back of your mind, the adjustments actually don't need to be huge.
No.
it just, but listening is probably the first piece there, and you'll see why.
Honestly, I am hopeless at listening. That's the one thing that I need to really focus on, because I'm always 70 steps ahead. And I'm like thinking of the answer to the answer of the question that hasn't even been asked yet. And you got to bring yourself back to the present moment. And that's why I love, and I'm sure many people that have watched my webinars in the past go, just shut up, Kristina, like stop interrupting. But it's like, I'm going to lose my thought if I don't. So
yes,
this is a safe place.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, let me kick off with a question for you, Nat. We're sort of hearing more about ADHD diagnosis, particularly among high-performing professionals. From your perspective, why are we seeing this sort of a rise now?
Yeah, I think that I'll just challenge that frame rise. I don't think that we're seeing more ADHD. I just think what we're seeing actually is more awareness and a better diagnostic pathways. And I think that the modern workplace, it's the modern workplace that makes executive functioning differences far more visible now. And I think to understand why, it's to understand what's actually happening more so in that ADHD brain. And so I'll get a little bit into that neuroscience piece as well, because it's generally fascinating, and it can really reframe how we really can think about this. And so let's start with the prefrontal cortex here. So this is the section of the brain for where we hold all of our executive functioning. So our planning, our prioritising, initiating tasks, regulating emotions, managing time, and holding information in our working memory, which you just mentioned before, Kristina, there. So in a neurotypical brain, then inverted commas, that prefrontal cortex, what it does is it connects with the fluidity, with the brain's reward and attention systems. So it kind of essentially acts more as a conductor of an orchestra. So it keeps everything more coordinated and in sequence. But in an individual that is diagnosed with ADHD, that the conductor can be present, but the connection between that prefrontal cortex and then our dopamine pathway, it can function differently. So dopamine is that the neurotransmitter that's associated with our motivation and our reward and our attention. So what that ends up doing, that's less consistently available. So the brain doesn't signal this is worth starting, in more of that consistent way. So this is why I suppose ADHD is sometimes described as not a deficit of attention, but more a deficit of consistent access to attention. So the capacity is really there, but the integration system is essentially wired differently. But here's what's really, I suppose, critical for the workplace context here is that the ignition system responds to interest, to urgency, to novelty, and mainly to challenge. So not so much the importance or not the deadlines set by someone else, and not willpower. So this is, and I'm wondering if you're actually resonating when I'm saying that, Kristina, is that, when we can feel that it needs to be urgent and it's kind of more so placed on us, we can still leave that bit to the last minute, and then we act on that, and that can create a lot of conflict with our colleagues because we look like we're leaving things to the last minute and we're being lazy. I'll get up to stereotypes in a moment, but this is there is a reason for that. It's because of the disconnect in dopamine there. But it gets
preparing for this webinar. The both of us were last night and this morning finalising everything. But I dare say we started the prep yesterday. Like this is it's just how we work.
How we work, yeah. I think it's also you mentioned memory before, and this is because when most people think about memory difficulties, they think about forgetting things, but what's actually happening also then in the ADHD brain is a little bit more specific, more nuanced, right? So we've got two working memory systems that we need to understand here. So you've got your working memory, which I like to say is our brain's whiteboard. So it's a system that holds the information in our mind while we're actively using it. So that's like sequencing a task or holding a thought while we write it down, remembering what someone's just said, and then while you formulate that response. So this research, is consistently showing that the working memory is one of the most significantly affected functions of ADHD. It's not the information isn't received, it's that our whiteboard isn't holding it long enough to really act on it. So it's like we're using one of those, those spy pens that we used to have when we were a kid, like, the writing then starts to disappear after a while. We've then got our other working memory piece, which is our long-term memory. And so this is even more complex, right? Because it's the transfer of information from short-term memory into long-term memory storage. It depends heavily on our attention and our emotional encoding. So when our attention system can be dysregulated, that transfer can be really unreliable. So we can have ADHD professionals remembering with extraordinary clarity something that was emotionally meaningful or deeply interested to them. Like, I can pull facts out that everyone's like, wow, like that was a useless piece of information for today. Yeah, anything, like just a really quite, I don't want to say quirky, but like really left field in that way, but have zero recollection of a meeting that they sat through an hour ago and could not retrieve any information. So that's again that level of disconnect, and it's not selective listening. It is really neurobiological, and it's been proven because our hippocampus, which plays the critical role in essentially consolidating these memories from the short term into long term, it's directly influenced again by our dopamine system. Are we interested? Is it urgent? Does it matter really to us? Is it purposeful? And so this is the piece, that we've kind of got to understand. Just to add a little bit more in there is our cortisol levels. So, we talk a lot about burnout, and I'll show you the connectors in a minute with ADHD and burnout, but stress can actively impair memory consolidation, I think, in anyone, as we know, right? Once we can, but with ADHD, when we feel like we're in a high pressure environment, and when we say high pressure environment, it's like when we feel scrutinized, or when we kind of internalize this and we're worried about our own performance or managing the emotional load, sometimes of masking that we're okay. Our cortisol actually rises there, and the elevated cortisol is always going to interfere with our ability, or the hippocampus's ability to consolidate those new memories. So if we're in a workplace condition, that we've got that stress continually around, or we're having those level of self-doubts, or dare I say that imposter syndrome starting to come in, especially with the higher order ADHD professionals, that can really start to play havoc there with the memory. So, we know what that might look like in practice. I do it all the time, losing a train of thought mid-sentence, walking into a room, not knowing why, being told something in a meeting, literally having no recall, starting a task, being interrupted, and completely unable to recover where you've gone. I'm sure many people on this call, if you can relate to what we're saying personally, how many tabs are open on your Safari or your Chrome at one stage. What does your home page, your home desktop look like? There's so many pieces that are unfinished that are important at the time, but then you can even go back and go, why did I start this? So this is, where, workplace implications are really significant. And, today, I think, in the way we're working with so much focus on having that sustained digital focus, sometimes that self-directed prioritization or long stretches without any real external structure, that can sometimes be really particularly challenging for the ADHD brain, not because they're not capable, but because the environment isn't providing those neurological conditions to really activate and to allow that brain to flourish and then retain that information. So it's a lot there.
It's sort of sounding like, I guess you're saying like the diagnosis isn't necessarily like a crisis point. It's more like a moment of clarity.
Yep, absolutely. The diagnosis didn't create the ADHD, really. It just gives it a name. And this is where it's what I was saying, there's so many, and I don't like the word deficit in here, but people then think it's that personal reflection of like your behavior or your personality, what are you lacking in comparison to the rest of, even the workplace, because, we'll look at Australian data and research, and it's around 2 to 5% of adults they believe are living with ADHD, but many are diagnosed, as you said, the start 30s, 40s, 50s. So this is, and the reason why that diagnosis is there is because the workplace demands are intensifying at this time. And so there's those pressures that create this discombobulation that leads people to go, okay, I've got to do something about it. And because those pathways are a little bit easier to get to and a little bit, dare I say, more normalised, we're seeing that those diagnoses increase.
That's incredible. And as you were saying that, and I was active listening,
Good.
Nicole, like my mind, you'll probably see my facial expressions throughout, I'm like, this is me, like me. And then Nicole has written in the chat, is this why when I'm doing a stressful project or an assignment, by the end of it, it's all a blur and I can't remember what I've done? I do that all the time.
Yeah.
And the stress and the cortisol levels and the masking, like I can't wait to go and chat to my beautician after this, because she always tells me I've got to lower my cortisol levels. I'm like, I feel so great at the moment. Like I'm doing all the things, but it could be, yes, I am doing all the things, but it's like working and doing these last minute pressure jobs, which we do to ourselves because that's how we work.
Yep.
But that's causing high cortisol. This is wild.
Yeah.
Wild. We'll go on to the next question because I will ramble forever. In your clinical experience, what does receiving a late diagnosis actually mean for someone, not only like emotionally, but professionally as well?
Yeah, and I think that's one of the most layered experiences I've witnessed, in my clinical work, and it's really simple, because the first thing a lot of people feel, right, is relief, like just really an enormous, overwhelming relief. I feel like this explains my whole life.
I cried.
I had clients, they've come, that they've said, I thought I was lazy, I just needed to try harder. And it can be heartbreaking when you hear that, but really hopeful, and that's what we work on. And I think that alongside that relief, as you probably said, is that there's almost always grief. So people begin to look back at the opportunities they may not have pursued, the roles they left, the relationships that's strained by forgetfulness or by emotional intensity. And I think they realise how much invisible effort it took to achieve what appeared really effortless in others. And this is, as I was writing this with you and thinking about this, I always reflect fondly on my time as a PhD, as a student there. And I used to have this amazing friend, and we'd sit there and she'd pump out, 5,000 words in a day. And I would say to her, 5,000 words, like, that's unbelievable. I said, so how many times would you have to go back and edit that? And she goes, well, none. And she goes, well, how many times would you have to go back and edit? And I said, like maybe 15, 20. And she was like, so that's how much effort it would take me, you, to do that, to get to that same level of outcome. And, as soon as, so I have all these memories of when I look back and go, well, that explains that. And what I think I realised is how much effort I have put in to be like level to everyone else who that doesn't
sending an email. Like
Yeah.
The amount of times I reread an email, double check who I'm sending it to, triple check that I'm not forwarding something that I shouldn't be. I reread email after email, and it's the most simple, basic email. And I think, I've just got to triple check this. I've got to triple check that and make sure that I'm sending it to the right person with the right wording. where someone would have just typed that and just flicked it off.
Yeah, and because that's that self-doubt piece that's become ingrained. And self-worth is something that it has to very much come into these conversations. Like it's just exactly, because we haven't put ourselves up there because we've tried so hard. That makes us more that people pleaser, and we're more prone to saying sorry. Because we're apologising for ourselves. But that section there becomes really important for me and for our practitioners at Connect Psych that also work with ADHD really need to address, because so many late diagnosed adults, their sense of self has been just eroded over the years, of not understanding why things feel harder than they just seem to for everyone else.
Yeah, I might ask a question in case it comes up again, and then people will understand. So Shannon has asked, what is masking and how does it present, I guess?
Yeah. I think that we'll get down to that, Shannon. So that's, I think I'm going to unpack that quite a lot.
Amazing.
About masking. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yep.
Now, this is, like, as you can probably all gather, this is something that both Nat and myself have personally lived. Now, I really think your story is one that many people in the room really need to hear. Would you like to share it with us?
Yeah, absolutely. And I, I think as coming from a psychologist and coming from the diagnostics is quite fascinating. Like, that I've kind of, there's a bit of a saying, the hairdresser can't cut their own hair. And I recognised it, I just didn't diagnose it. And I think that the reason is that for most of my career, I've been the self-motivator. I've been the small business owner. I was the lecturer at uni. I've always driven my own agenda. And when you obviously drive your own agenda, and everything that I do, and people will always know that I'll only do something if it's connected to purpose. So I worked and figured that out, like obviously early, and I would class myself more as that futurist, that visionary, which again is because we're always at Pluto, aren't we, Kristina? Like, oh no, it's not a plan anymore, but you know what I mean? Like, we're always so far ahead. And so if I could actually run my own race, then I could go as far ahead as I wanted to, because I'm the ruler of my own kind of galaxy style. And I thrived in that. I loved it. Again, complete autonomy, working on what's interested, the way I wanted to work, pace that suited me, which I didn't realise was, cracking pace, because I didn't have any baseline. And then, at 44, I walk in and I step into more the corporate role. And this was something that I was just I just loved it. I thought, it's different. It's a different kind of structure. I get to kind of see and meet different people in a different way. But I knew as soon as I kind of walked in that I was very different to how people were working. And I would walk in with a lot more enthusiasm than others and a lot more drive. And I always found it interesting that I could see that I was already an outlier. And so I kind of kept on going with that. And, but then the structures and the rules and the systems, it started to, I suppose, become really evident that I was quite different. And then I started hearing, how come you can have so many balls in the air? And it was, bewildered admiration, dare I say. But also then I started to interpret that as people don't think I can do it. Can I do it? Am I, not paying attention in meetings, or I'm not listening? But my ideas, my strategy, my vision, the things I'd always been celebrated for, I felt that it was landing, that they were very foreign, kind of like I was speaking a little bit of a different language to the rest of the team. And so then I started to really question, is this where I should be? So from something that actually started so positively, I started to have those doubts. And, deeply, I was just questioning the way it was how I worked and how I'd always work was the actual problem, whether I was the problem there. And I think that what then started to really hit home was how dysregulated I started to become in those settings. And that was when it begins to shift, and I became really hyper aware of everything I said and I did. And I then started to close down.
Mm.
And so I was worried, and I suppose this is, hard to say out loud, that everything I'd worked for was built, and I felt like it was sitting on a little bit on a knife's edge. And, there was that one impulsive comment that I could make, or, questioning emails, and, am I just one move away from undoing everything that I've really tried so hard? So I was asking close friends and other colleagues, people who know me for years, whether they thought, because you're hearing this obviously as well, like, do I have, high functioning ADHD? They just laughed out loud. They're like, you serious? Like,
of course you do.
Of course you do. Like, it's just really. And, and I just thought that, look, I'm just highly motivated. I work, I play hard. And I'd always been that way. And, it was only when I met up with a psychiatrist and they said, you are just
textbook.
And I was like, wow, okay. And it was kind, it was beautiful. Like, it wasn't, And
what happened? What happened when you received that? Like, what did you feel?
Relief.
What changed? Yeah.
A complete and utter relief. And just knowing that I felt desperate. Desperate to go at that stage, to go, I've got to do, I felt like I needed to do something about it. And, even the practice manager at this, the clinic that is, adult ADHD diagnoses, she also used to say, now I know that now you're going to be really, impatient, because you've got to now that you've got the diagnosis, now you've got to wait for another psychiatrist to provide you the medication. And I'm like, oh, that's going to take ages. She goes, we always get this. It's okay. You've lived this long. you can last another few,
honestly,
few months.
The wait list, like, it was from my own experience, the wait list when I called to get a first appointment was 6 months. And then after that, it's like another 3 months to have another session. And then it's almost a year later and you're finally getting a diagnosis. And I'm like, this is a cruel twist of fate. And then you forget to book again in enough time to redo your script.
Oh, it's a funny, one thing that I suppose that was really also, from a workplace perspective, is that the focus on, I used to be a great multitasker, and I think I still am, but to actually sit there and go, oh, I don't feel the urge to multitask as much as I used to. And I'd sit there and I kind of listen. I fidget, I wouldn't be looking around, wanting to get to the next thing.
It gets quieter, doesn't it?
It gets quieter, yeah. My sequencing of thoughts, retrieving the right word at the right moment. I think planning structure, the sustaining, attention. I think that coordinating, that's it's so hard, especially in working memory for the ADHD. But, once you had this diagnosis and the medication, I would know the word. I just, it was, look, it's, I could finally stop really, I think, interpreting the experience as real evidence of inadequacy over the years, Kristina. I think that, I needed to start understanding them more about how my brain actually works, and then being able to have the confidence to talk to people about that. And I'm happy to that's just obviously the tip of the iceberg of my story, and everyone has a story to tell. But the more we can normalize that, and have a great leader, a fabulous boss who sat down and is more empathetic and said, I've never met anyone like you before. And I'm like, that's big, because you've met a lot of people. And he's like, you're just one out the box. And I said, well, work with me and trust me. And that's the psychological safety that's really important for us to then take that first step of acknowledging this has been hard, and having someone else that empathizes with that creates that space for for a better environment.
100%. And I think like reframing the wording from, like you said, inadequacy to like empowered, like informed, like I'm aware.
Yeah.
And you being aware and informed, allowing your employer or your employees or your colleagues or whoever understand how you work, and not having any shame in it is the biggest thing, I think. And it's because to everybody else it's sort of invisible, isn't it? Like it's like you've got to mask, and that's what the masking is. Like you've got to pretend that you can work the same as everybody else, but you can't. And until you can actually find the confidence or find the empowerment to speak to your workers and to your colleagues and to your bosses, and then reshape the way that you actually work, that's when it becomes a real superpower. And I know a lot of people say ADHD, channel it as a superpower, not like a hindrance. It's cliche, but I really feel once you get that awareness that you actually are diagnosed and you do have it, and the way that you think is like it's correct, like you're not wrong. That's when you can truly like just move mountains, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. You're so right. Like, you know, and it's the way that leaders, you know, can respond, you know, curiosity, warmth, willingness to understand it. You know, it brings back your confidence 100-fold when you're able to do that. And then, yes, I think the superpower actually just elevates. And you know, again, in meetings, like I can say things and I'm, you know, I work on how to pitch that and land that a little better so other people can understand. But then having that understanding, like, oh, Nat's, you know, she's 3 years down the track, she's got this, just go with it. It allows me to go, you know what I'm going to say, you know, that, like, you know, I base things on intuition, which we can do. You know, sometimes I feel that, you know, the power of being able to, I feel like sometimes we can have a crystal ball, can't we? We know what might be coming.
You pick up on energy, on vibes, on theories. You can read the room. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. So, and that to me is a superpower, and it's really a great place to have in the workplace by way of diversity.
Yeah. And like just being transparent and having the communication with your team it's only going to get less shameful, and it's going to allow everybody to just really, really, really work to the best of their capabilities, isn't it?
Yeah.
Speaking
absolutely.
of like being successful and working to the best of their capabilities, there are so many people, I guess, diagnosed later in life that have been remarkably successful. What sort of has enabled that success, do you think? Like, and does it come at a cost?
Yeah, and this is the question that's so important, I think, and why there's such a late diagnosis is because ADHD in high performers, it gets dismissed precisely because of that success. You know, you can't have ADHD, look at what you've achieved.
Yeah.
You know, but with ADHD comes genuine powerful strength. So, you know, many ADHD professionals are extraordinarily creative. They're lateral thinkers. They see, you know, they connect the dots really well. Energizing, passionate, you know, they bring the room to life, and they can perform, or we can perform exceptional under pressure. Okay, so our brain's optimized for urgency and for novelty, and especially then, you know, if it's something's meaningful and stimulating. So the H is not the hyperactivity, it's the hyperfocus. Okay, so this is the hyperfocus piece. It's intense, and you know, people have just said it's just, you know, it's remarkable. I don't know if you've ever lost yourself in a train of thought because of the passion that you might have with it, and you can look up and like, wow, that's like 7 hours worth of work. You know, like, as in, I loved it so much and I can't believe where the time went, because you can get lost in that hyper focus.
I get that reading now. Yeah.
Reading, yeah. And I think that these aren't workarounds; they're real capabilities, aren't they? And this is that neurobiological reality. You know, the success has often been built on an adrenaline-based productivity model. So again, this goes back to our prefrontal cortex discussion, because the dopamine availability is that less consistent, and the urgency and the pressure gives that, you know, that temporary spike, you know, essential, you know, really to essentially forcing that ignition system on. So that's why so many ADHD professionals, say I only really get started when it's almost too late, or it's not that poor character. It's just that the way we're our brains are manufactured there. And so I think the hidden tax is really what I want to name, though specifically here is that cost. What you said before, what looks like calm and capable, as a senior leader, or even managing that complexity can actually be. It sometimes feels like someone's running on 3 internal management systems simultaneously just to appear functional. And going home completely depleted every single day. So I don't know if you feel that, or anyone else is listening right now, is that you give your 150% and you come home and you're like, I've got nothing left. And sensory wise, like you can really feel that. I've got my young boys at home as well. And if one of them's on and it has they giving me a sensory overload, I can't process, and I find that is very, very overwhelming. And I even thought, when we were talking about this as well, a brilliant woman I worked with, director of a large organisation known for creativity and ability to hold enormous complexity. She, described her daily experience having 47 tabs in her head open at all times, but not being able to close any of them. Spectacular at her job, but she was also so burnt out, and she just couldn't even fully explain it. She couldn't even get the words out of the, and that her diagnosis, that she got diagnosed at, I think it was 43, but didn't change what she was capable of. But what it changed is she asked herself, as in what she was finally willing to give. And ask of her organisation, because people are just, I guess, they've got to set boundaries. Yeah, that's it.
Because we don't. We're enormous yes people, aren't we? Or like,
yes,
we'll just go and go and go and go and go and go and give and give and give and give until we get home and you sit on your lounge and you're like, your family's around and you just don't talk because it's like you almost go mute because it's like I've given everything. So it's so important to be able to tell your workplace, especially like bringing it back to this workplace. Like it's easier when you're like, I know with my husband and my daughter, like you were just saying, if they're around and you're not burnt out, but like you've just given your all and you just need to sort of decompress and sit in silence and not move, and they act normal, which is how they would always act, but you're so burnt out that it's heightened, and they're the ones that will experience the worst side of you because you've given your all to everybody else. So if you can manage to talk to your employees or your colleagues or something like that and work out this really sort of synonymous, like easy, well, not easy, but like this workplace balance, which we're all searching for, if you can communicate and give that information to your employees, your workplace, your colleagues, it's going to allow you to be able to be better with your family when you get home, isn't it? Like,
absolutely.
And it's not just a workplace thing. It's so holistic in its approach that we need to sort of find that balance, don't we? There's a question here from Nicole. How can we avoid burnout, especially as we get older and don't want to run on adrenaline anymore? And I think that question leads perfectly, as did what we just discussed, into masking and overfunctioning and how that actually shows up in leadership and professional environments. I mean, what does it do to a person over time? And masking, really, I think someone's said before, I think it was Shannon, was at its core, it's really that effortful performance of the neurotypical functioning. It's the energy spent appearing organised and focused and composed while internally managing significant cognitive and emotional complexity there. And in leadership context, it can really look like over preparation. So spending 3 times longer than necessary on a presentation because, the fear of losing a thread mid-delivery can be really overwhelming, especially if we've got that self-worth or that, belief system pumping or being heightened. And it can actually still occur at certain times there.
Compulsively checking, you mentioned the emails. Yeah, again, rereading those emails, triple checking them. People pleasing, gosh, saying yes to everything. I'm one of those, because disappointing people feels just, and it actually hurts me. It feels intolerable. Because I also feel, which we'll get up to hopefully, is that rejection sensitivity too. So I'm a real people pleaser. Also, being an only child as well, that kicks it in too. We work longer hours, not from commitment, but because the cognitive tax of getting started can sometimes mean that real productivity can potentially sometimes kick in later in the day. But everyone's a bit different based on, so just hold that one lightly. But I think performing energy, sometimes that appearing enthusiastic and present in meetings while internally depleted or not interested, that's the mask that, some of us still need to wear. So what does the neuroscience tell us about why masking is so costly? Because again, it comes back here, Kristina, is that this is the primary side of our emotional regulation. So when it's already under significant load, so managing our attention, sequencing the tasks, filtering distractions, it has less capacity to regulate those emotions. So this is where I was saying before, that was my tipping point, was that I was becoming really emotionally dysregulated. And I couldn't control it. I think that's probably there I can be. I just couldn't. I felt like I was losing grip there. The person who appears composed is working so hard to maintain that composure. And any of those small additional stresses, it can really feel quite disproportionately destabilizing there. And this is where empathy becomes so important, both self-empathy and empathy of those around you, because from the outside, I suppose an ADHD professional who's making, who's masking, it can look like they've got capacity to spare, this is the yes person, and they'll go yes, and they have negative capacity, and they'll take on more. And it's just, they'll get it done because you've said yes, and you do, because the more you load in, it's more, everything's then urgent. So therefore you pump it out, and you're actually just causing you disadvantage to yourself. As I'm talking about this, I'm also going, that's also you. So it's, I know that's much easier said than done, but this is the reasons here. And then we feel like frauds. So I talked before about, imposter syndrome. And as we know, as we actually get higher and we become, higher up any of the levels of professionals or status, or however you might want to suggest that in a hierarchy within a workplace, the higher the imposter syndrome, that I don't feel that I deserve this. So you then the effort required to perform, this capability, it can feel quite shameful to them too. I hear it a lot. Clients say, everyone thinks I'm so confident, but I spend more time managing my own brain than I do to actually work. That kind of self-worth wound hits me hard.
I'm getting so emotional just listening to this and reading some of the comments, and I just think I feel so seen. It's it's incredible. And I guess what happens when the masking goes on too long, especially without support? What happens then?
Yeah. Well, that's is it? Oh my goodness, man. Here we go. Was it Lauren? Beautiful Lauren before was asking burnout. This is where it starts to hit. So we become into I won't get too much into the style of what I call the zone of delusion. I do a lot of work with burnout as well, clients, that we kind of get here, and I think ADHD sits so well in the zone of delusion all the time. No, we're fine, we can take it on, what we can do, we can keep on doing it
until we can't.
We all have a finite bucket until we can't. And that's where we start to see the burnout. You said cortisol is a big hit, that actually then affects digestive system, that affects immunity, that affects blood pressure. We can start to see some physiological responses to that as well, with burnout. So it's that chronic stress sits there.
I got shingles for the first time.
You got shingles? Year. I get hives.
the doctor
bad
told me I
heights.
had shingles, and I was like, I'm not 80. What are you talking about? And he's like, well, it's
Mm,
from stress. Are you stressed? And I was like, no, I'm fine. Then I got home and I
yeah,
told my partner, and he's like, well, of course, you idiot. Like,
it's,
you need to stop. And
yeah,
it's just your body keeps the score as well, doesn't it? Like, it's
it
just
does. It does. Yeah,
wild.
it would
Anyway, sorry.
tell you to slow down. But no, but that's right. But
Yeah.
I think in workplaces, what we notice as well is that the decision making and the task paralysis starts to become
Oh,
also more evident. It's like you've got nothing left, like it's where task paralysis meaning, where the brain cannot really even initiate despite genuinely wanting to. Emotion dysregulation, again, is a real growing disconnection from your own signals and needs. So you just ignoring it. And I think as well, so I came back to task paralysis there, like it's really important, especially in leadership settings, because it can look like avoidance and disengagement, but internally it's just an overwhelmed prefrontal cortex and it just can't sequence it. And so, I will say, like, and I know even my verbal will be, I just can't, like, I can't. And that is a big sign to other people going, let's take some tasks off, or let's just go for a walk. Let's just, she can't right now, just don't. And, I think that is where that intervention can really help, like especially working, with a practitioner, ADHD practitioner, and especially identifying in that late diagnosis, in particular, the burnout piece.
What sort of tools and tips would you give to people to help with this?
Look, it is around boundaries for burnout. It's around especially boundaries, obvious boundaries, which you might then need to help with a leader and with your leader or with a colleague about how to create those kind of boundaries, because that really can potentially be that work design system. But also in boundaries, that there is an element that you can then make clear to everyone, is that every day you would then be taking a break of some description, or you might want to take, 2 15-minute breaks, get out, get air. And if you can then start to even regulate the oxygen and carbon dioxide in your body, what that will then do is start to reduce the adrenal fight or flight system and be able to regulate you, because more blood flow goes to the prefrontal cortex. So instead of it becoming paralyzed because there's no blood flow there, it can settle down. And so this is what we really want to be doing. And then outside is got, I talk a lot about fractals and forest therapy and forest bathing. If anyone wants to know any more about it, please contact me, because I'm a big and exercise, because it's that's something that our brains actually need by way of serotonin and dopamine hits, that we can then create that through that movement, which I think a lot of individuals like to move around and be quite kinesthetic. Anyway, people can see the trail of destruction usually that will go on. That must be in that room now, because I can follow her path of just things leaving everywhere. But we want to move. So getting outside and moving is really important. And then creating those boundaries. But one thing as well is connecting yourself to your value system. So to me, and if I feel that I need to stay, I need to do more, what actually disconnects me is my values to my family. So two very busy boys coming home, I know, and I do a lot of grounding techniques, and grounding meaning for me is taking my shoes off and just playing basketball outside, or playing the latest is table tennis. It takes me, I can feel it. I can actually generally feel that stress leaving my body.
I literally go out into the shed with my daughter and we ride around on our bikes. Like, I got a bike and she has a bike, and we go for a ride, or we'll go for a walk. And then when my husband comes home, I can then go out and go for a half an hour walk. Nothing. Like, just go and do a walk, and then I come back in and I'm a new person. It's
new person.
Yeah. And something that Shannon has said as well is boundaries are honesty. Setting boundaries sometimes feels bossy. And is it saying I'm not able to do it yet, but I will? And I can wholeheartedly relate with this. I often look at people, and I think it's almost like a generational thing as well. A lot of the younger staff, like for myself, they're so easily able to say no. Like, no, I can't do that. No, I won't do that. And I just think, what do you mean no? What do you mean? Where are you getting that word from? What do you mean? And then when I see them do that, and then they just, everyone's like, oh, okay, no worries. What? You're allowed to say no?
Yeah.
Like, you just don't think that, do you?
Exactly. And I think that, you know, that is, and being really hard as ADHD to say no. It's like, you don't need to say, even if that's like, I can't, that is not in my vocab, it's just not now, or I'll get to that tomorrow, or you know what, I've got time next week. And that's okay, because we're so used, because of that rejection sensitivity disorder, to feel rejected by that, to say, if I say that, what are they going to think of me? Are they going to think that I'm incompetent? Are they going to think I'm being difficult? Like, so that we've got this kind of narrative in our brain. And so the easier thing for us to do is just say yes. But that's something that I work a lot with, is challenging those thoughts. And that is a continual thing. And believe me, I still have to do that as well.
And not over-explaining yourself. Yeah. And
not over-explaining.
What Shannon has just said is no. It's a complete sentence. Learning that, if we can, is the biggest blessing. I know we're almost out of time. We've got so much more to cover, but we might even do a part two of this even. What I'm thinking is to wrap it up, sort of thing.
That could be easy.
Yeah, probably. What I'm thinking is to sort of wrap it all up. What are organisations missing when they treat ADHD purely as an individual support issue? So going back to the start where we asked, what does your organisation do for ADHD people or D people or neurodivergent people?
Yeah.
What are they missing when it comes to the support rather than a systems issue?
Yeah, I think they miss the most important opportunity available to them. You know, if ADHD is framed only as a personal productivity challenge, you know, the organisation defaults, you know, to individual level interventions, you know, like, as I think that we just said at the start, like, you know, coaching, medication, EAP, reasonable adjustments, all of which can generally help, absolutely, but none which addresses the work system. And I just want to bring empathy back to this, and, you know, what has happened, you know, from personal lived experience here, because if systems change without the empathy, it's just a restructure. It's not going to actually, it really won't create a huge amount of impact. You know, what we want to see with organisations is a culture of genuine curiosity about how their people experience that work. Not assumed, you know, not inferred from performance. Actually ask them. You know, I think of a leader who I worked with, and after her own diagnosis, you know, really started asking her team in one-on-ones, what's the thing about how we work that makes your job harder? And what can we do to make it easier? And so that answer it transformed her understanding of her team. And not because people disclose neurodivergent conditions, it's not that, it's because the question actually created that safety piece. And in that safety, people are more likely to feel that they can tell the truth of what working and what wasn't. But it's also that's where we want to get to, isn't it, in organisations? We want people to be working in their strengths, or predominantly in their strengths. And so for every person in your organisation, if they've received a diagnosis, there are others that actually haven't, you know, who might be even navigating that same experience, maybe not with the language, quietly burning out in the background because they're masking. And so having that system that leads with curiosity before just restructuring is just, it can be done. So I think that, sorry.
No, I was just saying, thinking about what can be done before restructuring just hit me so hard. It's like that I've worked in so many different, well, not so many, but I've worked in quite a few different companies, and the ones where I've done the best are the ones where I've been employed to work 15 hours as a receptionist, and then next minute I'm running webinars. Like you've gone on this crazy journey where they've seen your strengths and how you work and what you can do, and they've pointed you in those directions and they've helped you to go to those places rather than, nope, that's the box you've ticked, you're staying there. Like, so if you as an organization can sort of think outside the box and see if there's a way where you can improve upon the way that your employees are allocated roles or tasks, or what they can do and what their strengths are, and communicate with them more in a way that you can understand how they're thinking and make them feel safe to be able to communicate with you, you will be able to then, if your workplace is able to do that, not everybody is as flexible as others, but if your workplace is able to push you in a direction that will allow you to work better, the positive snowball effect is going to be infinite.
Huge, absolutely huge. And that's exactly it. You have the trust, and if leaders then trust the person because they've also listened and they've restructured based on their, not restructured, dare I say, but like, placing them into that strengths piece, it's infinite. Yeah, I'm so with you because of the creativity that we can bring and connecting of those dots. A lot of ADHDs, funny that, lead the way. So they are the futurists, they are the small business owners, they are the entrepreneurs. So you listen and you trust, and then you'll see the positive consequences. Don't push them down. Don't try box.
Yeah, God. Now, I hate that we're out of time.
So do
what
I.
I'm going to ask is, we're going to go through the questions that everybody has written, and I might see if we can put together a bit of a newsletter or something after today, and we'll pop it in with the recording of today's session. I know you've got a few resources and other things that you would be able to send to everybody that's registered as well. And we'll send the transcript out as well. I noticed a few people ask for that, but honestly, I can't thank you enough. Your honesty and your compassion and your not only personal experience, but your clinical experience is just unmatched. And I know for myself, I'm going to rewatch this and there's going to be so many light bulb moments. Even just I'm stuck on certain ones back at the start, and I'm trying to actively listen throughout, but I can't. And it's just, this is so incredibly important, and I think it's something that so many people are going to continually be able to learn from and build upon. And I know you at Connect Psych Services are always there and willing to help and happy to listen and help you guys as well in your workplaces. So I'll add all of your details in there as well, and like I said, I will be sharing a resource list and other things, and I'll send out the recording to everybody too. But again, I can't thank you all enough. It's been absolutely incredible. I think this is this is my favorite one I've ever done. So probably because I'm so self-absorbed with it all, but thank you so much. Thank you. And
pleasure. Thanks everyone for hanging. This has been great as well. I hope everyone got something out of it as well. And I'm happy to do a part 2. We didn't really even get up to RSD and what we can do for ourselves and thinking. So I'll leave it with you. I've got to run.
Yeah.
And I'll speak to everyone.
All right. Thank you so much, guys. Bye.
Okay. See ya. Bye.